and welcome to the Ident Review, the show where we have a good look and chat about the various television idents that we have come to know and love over the years. And for this instalment, as we're now in December, we're going to take a look at the Christmas idents that represented BBC1 in the 1970s and the 1980s. Christmas time has always been a special time for British television. All the signature programmes adapt their Christmas storylines, and the season often is used for the debut of brand new shows or special 1 or 2 part series that are often of the highest calibre. Be sure to check out Watership Down this year. But all the way back in 1967, BBC1 showcased its very first Christmas ident, and each year since they've returned radically different or often just very charming. Now, in regards to the first half of the 1970s, there is no video footage of these idents available, which is understandable. I mean, it was at a time when video recorders weren't affordably available to the public, and archive presentation wasn't exactly top of the BBC's things to do. But there are screenshots available of these idents, which you're seeing now on your screen. But the first clip of the day is from Christmas of 1974, so let's take a look. Not much change from the norm, but very charming nonetheless. For some of the earlier screenshots, this seems similar to idents from earlier in the 1970s, and it's a very subtle change from the recently introduced BBC1 blue and yellow mirrored globe. I like how the background has become a series of glittering snowflakes, and some may not agree, but I think that then complements the rotating globe quite well. It makes it that more prominent of a figure during the whole sequence. Now let's have a look at the following year, in Christmas of 1975. So this one is a bit of a disappointment. Don't get me wrong, I still love the design and it's beautiful to look at, but there just isn't that much variation or change to the overall look. It's still the same globe and snowflake background, the only majorly different thing is the Christmas on BBC1 fonts, which still looks nice, but I just wish something much more had been done with this ident overall. No matter though, as the following year there is a bit more of a shake-up. So here is Christmas 1976. Apologies for the grainy footage, but I quite like this revision. So sure, the BBC1 Christmas font is virtually similar to the previous year, but it's the change to the main feature. The globe has gone, and in its place, a giant rotating snowflake. It's such a small yet big difference at the same time, and what I mean by that is the big change is it's not the globe, but to replace just one small key thing to make the small thing that's also a big change, I'm confusing myself, but overall it gives this ident so much more of an identity, and it remains one of my favourites from the 70s. Here's hoping better quality footage appears in the years to come. Let's move on to further revisions with Christmas 1977.
Well, now on with our programmes for Christmas Eve, and at 11 o'clock Elvis Presley stars in one of his most popular and famous films, GI Blues. First, Noel Edmonds presents a very special, seasonal swap of the pops.
Exactly what a Christmas ident should be. Right off the bat you have some staples of the season. The rotating pudding, the snow-adorned background, the festive colours of red, green and white. Looking at this, you just know the Christmas season has begun. Honestly, again, the concept of something rotating is retained, but instead of a globe or a snowflake, we have a pudding. I honestly quite like this mid to late 70s approach of just swapping out different elements every year, and Christmas 1978 adapts this tactic as well, with interesting results.
Now on BBC1, the Christmas Eve film. Sophia Loren and Charlton Heston star in the spectacular story of Spain's greatest hero, the legendary El Cid.
Well, I bet some of you remember this. This one takes a few more big changes. The Christmas legend now takes up the majority of the screen. and I like how the snow adorns the red. It really does look quite gorgeous. But of course the main feature is the rotating head of Santa, or Santas if you count both faces. I don't know, but I know they did it to be festive and cheerful, but the way this head was moulded, it makes it look quite terrifying. And to be honest, seeing a rotating head on its own with a double face is enough to make any small, impressionable child have nightmares about a double-faced Saint Nick. Not one of my favourite idents of the decade, but it has its standout feature and some charm, or nightmare. But now, let's seal off the decade with the Christmas ident from 1979.
So now on One, our special Christmas Day feature film, being shown for the first time on British television. It brings together superstars Paul Newman and Robert Redford, who, to the accompaniment of Scott Joplin's ragtime music of the 30s, prepare for The Sting.
Now this is the first main big breakaway. Again, yes, the overall concept is the same, of a central figure rotating in the centre of the screen, but once again, it works brilliantly. The Christmas legend has been reduced, but the font and styling I think is very beautiful. The central image is now a model of various musicians and carolers, presumably spreading lots of positive Christmas cheer. They may not be animated or make any sound themselves, but there's just something so charming and British about a bunch of model people rotating against a Christmas landscape. It's actually quite Dickensian now that I think about it. But as the ident closes off the 1970s, we now move into the 1980s. So let's take a look at the first ident of this new decade.
And Dean Stockwell are the stars of the swashbuckling Rudyard Kipling adventure set in India. Kim.
Not that much of a jump from last year, but still quite charming. So instead of rotating carolers, we have some soldiers and presumably children gliding effortlessly around a snowman. It almost looks like they're ice skating, and I can't tell if they're wearing ice skates or not, but if they are, then it definitely makes a lot of sense. Not much else to say really, but a nice little ident for the festive season. Let's see if Christmas 1981 is much different, shall we? This is quite wildly different, but I really like it. The most stunning aspect of this is the colour. It's so wonderfully and brilliantly coloured. The reds and greens for the logo at the bottom are stunning, although part of me wants to chuckle as the Christmas BBC1 logo almost looks like a logo for an Italian takeaway. But the globes are gorgeous as well, still rotating, but I love that there are multiple globes and all of multiple colours. There may not seem that much to it, but I think it's one of BBC1's best Christmas idents in over their 50 years of using them. Let's see if the ident for Christmas 1982 can make me feel the same way.
Now, on BBC1, the story of a young girl whose love of horses is matched by her determination to become a top horsewoman. Tatum O'Neill, Nanette Newman, Christopher Plummer and Anthony Hopkins star in International Velvet.
Okay, that was a bit more of a come down. I mean, yes, mechanically it seems quite impressive, a large snowflake with all its sides rotating at different times, but it's so plain and so simple. The intrigue and impact wears off within seconds. And I'm not a fan at all of the BBC1 logo here. It just doesn't strike me as being anything standout or memorable. It's not one of the best, and ultimately quite forgettable. So come on Christmas 1983, what do you have for us?
Well, now another tale of passion, home brewed this time. For the next hour and a half, there's an abundant supply of black comedy, bottled and served as last of the summer wine.
Again, there is virtually no difference at all. I honestly can't believe they didn't go for some sort of complete overhaul. It's just a slightly more detailed snowflake with the standard BBC1 logo of the day in the middle. I know it's a minor complaint, but I miss the Christmas word appearing on screen, and just to reinforce the idents that represented the season. Again, like the previous year, it's very underwhelming and it's very forgettable. So Christmas 1984, let's be having ya.
Well, the partnership of wisecracks and wordplay amply fills the space on BBC One now as we join Les Dawson for a Christmas blankety-blank.
BBC1, another big deal for Robbie Box comes after half an hour of ever-decreasing... But back now to this Christmas night on BBC1, where we continue with one of the all-time great movies.
Finally, variety. This is what I will call the most 80s BBC1 Christmas ident. The font of BBC1 is particularly reminiscent of the era, as are the colours, but the premise is reverted back to the idents of the late 70s. A rotating central object, this time being a bunch of snowmen holding parts of a recently opened Christmas cracker. And what's nice about these sequences, as you've just seen, is that each has a different background colour to represent the time of day, these being the morning, the early evening, the night time, and for the time of close down. So overall, this one brings back the charm of BBC1 Christmas idents, and makes the effort to include that little bit more variety that ultimately helps it stand out as we look back at these sets. Moving on, let's see what Christmas 1985 can bring us.
And with the first sighting of BBC1's Christmas symbol, we continue this morning's programmes now with The Littlest Hobo.
There's a bit of a busman's holiday in 45 minutes for a team of television professionals, pitting their knowledge against the victorious Payne family in a Telly Addicts Christmas special.
In with the new, whilst retaining some of the old. The main change is the BBC1 logo, with the font now echoing the introduction of the computer-originated world that came into use in February of 1985. Also, the robins on screen are very impressively made and designed, a testament not only to technological advantages of the time, but the progression of these Christmas idents up to this point. It also echoes elements of the previous year, with a day and a nighttime variant. I think I still prefer the 1984 offering, but this one is a nice addition nonetheless. So let's now jump to Christmas of 1986 and see what's waiting for us there.
Here on BBC1, our drama features a little old lady whose natural curiosity leads her into another mystery. Joan Hickson stars as Miss Marple in The Murder at the Vicarage by Agatha Christie.
A very different approach to what has gone before. The main draw of this Christmas ident is that it's completely animated, and it's nice animation, colourful, seasonal and all that, but to be honest, it does come across as rather limited. I also feel that it's an ident where its charm has come with hindsight. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it was nice at the time, but it's charming to look back on now over 30 years later. But the limited animation is hard to ignore, and I wish they'd done something a little more with it. So is animation the future for BBC1 at Christmas? Let's look at 1987 and find out.
And BBC1's Christmas Day continues now with excitement and escapism in Steven Spielberg's fantasy adventure starring Harrison Ford as the intrepid hero, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Mixed feelings on this one. On the positive, I absolutely adore the logo design for this year. It's so colourful, varied, so many fonts and styles and items being included, a true testament to the imagination and creativity of its designers behind the sequence. What I'm a bit on the fence about is the whole sequence itself. Aside from the swirling 3D objects that, let's face it, were probably just included just to show off the latest tech the BBC could offer, but aside from that opening, it is just the logo. And as beautiful as the logo is, the sequence itself is just a bit underwhelming. The party popper start makes you think something big is building, but no, just a logo reveal. A bit of a missed opportunity, I think, but lovely on the design front. So up for the following year, here's the ident that represented Christmas of 1988.
This is BBC1, where we're all set for a spectacular adventure in time in the first television showing of the hugely successful feature film Back to the Future. And on BBC1 now, we make merry with Bob's Christmas Full House.
So back to an animation style. Now, even though there isn't a great deal of movement, I think this is a much more stunning than the 1986 ident. And overall, it's a lovely image. A bird sitting within a tree at Christmas time, simple, yet eloquent. The BBC1 logo does kind of ruin this a bit for me. It's far too pronounced and it takes up a lot of the screen, and it could have been easily included but on a much smaller basis, so that the overall image can be displayed in all its glory. And like the 1984 and 1985 Christmas idents, we have both a daytime and a nighttime variant for this year. I prefer the nighttime variant, I just think it conveys more of a warm and striking image overall, but the 1988 ident is a stellar example of visual design and beautiful drawing. So for our final ident of this episode, let's seal off the 80s with the Christmas ident for 1989.
Boxing Day on One, and the Christmas Ethel Feinstein in concert, and with the last of the turkey in sight, what more could you ask for?
And that's after a moment or two of reflection in the Christmas epilogue. Alec McCann reads the prologue to St. John's Gospel.
Well, what a lovely, wacky ident to end on. Right from the get-go, things are moving and coming alive. Toys, trains going through tunnels being ridden on by a giant teddy bear, surrounded by a Christmas tree and bright lights, a plane flying within a box, only to finish on a lovely bauble recreation of the BBC One computer-originated world globe. I also like the BBC One logo on the ribboning. It's not too overwhelming, it's subtly placed, but it's entirely noticeable and with good effect. I'm surprised and gutted that the BBC didn't release bauble versions of the globe. I would have bought that up in a heartbeat. But this is the point where Christmas idents started to become more than just the one-off logo for the season, or a rotating thing in the centre of the screen. This is where little stories can be created, or a sequence where lots of fun and Christmassy related things happen, and it was a trend that would only continue to be seen and expand in the 1990s. Overall, the progression of BBC One Christmas idents from the start of the 1970s to the end of the 1980s is quite staggering. We go from just a small variation on the standard mirror globe, to animations, to full sequences packed with colour, charm and imagination. So what would the 90s and 2000s hold? Well, you'll just have to wait and see. And so we've come to the end, but before we go, the final words from our broadcaster.
Entertainment for Boxing Day on BBC One with the many disguises of Dave Allen. The unique wit and humour of Dave Allen on Boxing Day at 10 past 10 on BBC One.
Tomorrow's Boxing Day programmes on BBC One. Here they are, and this is the lineup. Trying to get away from it all at 6:20 is Michael Caine, who is joined by some of the world's top soccer players to star in Escape to Victory, about a football match arranged between some prisoners of war and their German captors. That's at 6:20. Then fair play is not something the Ewings of Dallas are well acquainted with, especially when they're preparing for another oil baron's ball in Dallas. That's at 10 past 8. Then there's a slightly different look from the Radio Times. The news is now at 9 o'clock, and then the first in a three-part series on consecutive nights, in which Agatha Christie's Miss Marple unravels the mystery of the body in the library, and that starts at 9:15. Dave Allen takes his seat at 10 past 10, then Kenny and Dolly come together at 11 for seasonal country music, and if you need reminding, it's Rogers and Parton. Finally, the golf handicap at 11:45 is that the players have to complete the course using only one club, a challenge set for Severiano Ballesteros, Lee Trevino, Nick Faldo, and Japan's Isao Aoki, and that's Boxing Day evening here on BBC One. Now, the weather, and northern and western parts will have a rather cloudy day tomorrow with showers, these frequent and heavy in places, and falling as sleet or snow at times. Central and eastern areas will be brighter, but also rather cloudy at times with a few showers, especially later. It'll be rather cold with early afternoon temperatures around 5 or 6 degrees centigrade, the low 40s Fahrenheit.
That was all this week for this instalment of the Ident Review. I hope you all enjoyed watching it, and we hope that you tune in next week. Due to other commitments behind the scenes, the regular programme should hopefully reach you at their usual days and times, but if they do not, now you know why. But we will always do our best to get them to you, as your support is always appreciated. But until the next time, have a good week, and we hope that you join us again soon. Good night.
Thank you.